Right, here we go. What's up, guys? It's Jeremy. Got 3 minutes on the clock, and we're going to talk today about The Matrix IV Resurrections, the fourth one in the installment. So this is just pure improv. I don't really have anything rehearsed to say other than I want to share some kind of something that could be a benefit to you. Now, I'm curious what your thoughts are on it. This is one of the last movies that I went to see in December that I wanted to do a review on. And at the time, it was almost like this thing between Spider-Man and The Matrix, and like so many people were all about Spider-Man, and I heard a bunch of people say they didn't really care for The Matrix, and I went into this movie thinking, okay, well, what's the difference? Let me just go and see what they created, what kind of art they created, and what's the difference here? And so Spider-Man had like a lot of action and just this stunning visuals and all this stuff going on. And I watched The Matrix, and it's nothing like the first one, for example, where it was more of an action adventure wrapper around this substance of the story, right? And so it's interesting to me how people can get that mixed up sometimes, because this newer one, it's not as much action. There were some scenes that were in there, yet the substance of the story was really what they went back to, the comparison of where the Matrix came from and to where it ended up at, right? And so even in like real life, I've heard people that kind of got that mixed up. Like I never heard of this before until now, where it's like people, you see like movies where they're going in action, shooting stuff up, like kids or different people that had done things like that, and they tried to dub it. It was some documentary, almost like called The Matrix Defense, where it's like people got mixed up with reality, and they felt like they had to go and shoot up some stuff, not sure what reality is. And like, look, that's straight up from the enemy, okay? That is not the purpose of this movie, even though that's what they made in Hollywood. The purpose of it was just to question reality, okay? So we can do that now without having to go like hurt anybody or anything like that. That's not the essence of questioning our reality by going and hurting someone. I gotta throw that out there, right? Because it's just amazing to me that somebody would see the first movie or those series of movies and go do that, and then try to be like, well, I didn't know what reality was, and blah blah blah. Like, no, that's silly. That's from the enemy. So I want to kind of like put that into perspective, because the point of this movie was just to question our reality. Is it a simulation? What is it that's going on here? And so that was always the part that I enjoyed about it. It's like questioning things deeper, digging into the mind, digging into the construct of society and what all is going on here. And I think a big part of that is, well, there's your 3 minutes. Oh well. I think a big part of that is just that there's so much going on from the past leading up to the present and going into this new like technological future that it's kind of hard to tell, and it's hard for people to distinguish. So that's where the public service announcement comes in of like, with God or with Christ, you can find His truth, His way, His life, His healing, His salvation with Christ, and restoration, to be able to understand the things that are truthful, like His Holy Spirit, versus maybe like the other things of the enemy that we need to be able to distinguish. So that was kind of one of the main things I wanted to talk about, just about the Matrix itself. As far as the characters though, like with Keanu, funny enough, I've had people tell me for a long time, it's almost like this weird kindred spirit kind of match with him, where I've had people tell me since I was younger and had shorter hair, like, you look like that guy in the bus movie, the Runaway Bus. Like, oh, you mean Speed? Yeah, and then get a little bit older and have a little bit longer hair, and like the Matrix came out, and like, you look like me. Anybody ever told you look like Neo? Or more recently, I let my hair grow out. People tell me I look like John Wick. It's like, okay, so there's some kind of similarity there that I connect with and resonate with, just with his character, or with Keanu, yet also with the character of Neo, of just going through this like hero's journey and questioning what's going on in life. So I really appreciate that kind of aspect of it. So I thought he did a great job. The critics talking about his like wooden acting. The whole first part of the movie is just like, to pick up where the other movies left off, it looked like they were dead at the end of those movies, yet the machines picked them back up, him and Trinity, and like use some kind of technology, some kind of nano restoration to like work on their bodies and fix them after they had gotten hurt and looked like they were dead, put them back in a pod, jacked them back into the Matrix, and started feeding them blue pills. And so their whole memory or their whole experience of what their life was just kind of like blurred, and they don't necessarily remember. So the whole first chunk of that movie is him of just like, yeah, this kind of like the critics making fun of his acting, but it actually worked out pretty well right there. And that's not a blow towards him. That's not shots fired. That's just I think he's a good actor, and I think he does well. Might not be the most like whatever, but I've always enjoyed watching his stuff. And so through the whole first part of that movie, it turned out to be very, like, it was kind of frustrating for a little bit, but I went and watched it a second time. And it's like, okay, it just totally makes sense of how they completely just had their memory wiped. They were jacked back in, and they had almost like forgotten how to love. They forgot who they were. So there's this romance. There's this, not only this hero's journey kind of progression in this arc, yet this romance between him and Trinity, and just looking at the analyst, NPH, his character is the analyst, looking at what, and you could even think of this as the enemy, so to speak, looking at what the analyst had used to keep them in their comfort zone. And I thought that was such powerful dialogue when so many people are just searching for this bliss and this pleasure and this hedonistic type of lifestyle, to just be complacent and in a comfort zone. And the way the Matrix had the dialogue in the movie, I actually went back and watched it a third time. I saw it 2 times in theater, and I went and pulled it back up online to stream it, to go back through that dialogue, because it's such a powerful thing to think deeper on, not just on the surface, but to dig deeper beneath the surface and look at that. And so they're talking about the people's fears. Like, he was talking about holding people, in this kind of comfort zone between their fears, where they're kind of like, trying to stay away from their fears, but they've got these dreams and these hopes and desires, but they're not quite going for them, and they're kind of just like in this comfort zone complacency and this bliss that they get trapped in. And that's how people become complacent in the Matrix. And I was like, my gosh, that's such a powerful analogy for life. How the enemy can try to use our fears and all these things against us to kind of keep us trapped and locked. Yet with the grace of God, with Christ, we can let go of all that fear and all that trash and be able to move forward and remember like what it is to be human, and to spread or share or just deliver love to other people. Like, that was a commandment of Christ, is to love God and love your neighbor as yourself, and just to be that instrument of love after you receive your healing. And so to watch that progression of how Neo had to like question what was going on there, it's like, hang on, you finally get to a point where he meets Morpheus, or this version of Morpheus that comes back to like to challenge him, like, hey, something's going on here, we need to dig into this. And so he's got to go through that himself, and then he has to share that with Trinity, and they both have to remember who they were, and they're tapped back into their power instead of their complacency and just this kind of like fog. It has to be cleared out, and they have to tap back into who they're meant to be and to go and pursue that. And then it's like 2 eagles. It's like watching 2 eagles learn how to fly again and love. And I just loved that so much. I just I feel like I'm watching like a parallel, weird, like alternate reality of what they're going through and what I'm going through in my life. It's like, wow, this like hero's journey, and like having to reclaim your divine inheritance, perhaps, of like with the kingdom, with God. So it's a little different than what their science fiction world is, the narrative. But like in this reality, with God, to reclaim your strength and your power, and just be restored with Christ and with God, and have that courage and bravery to move forward with love. Like, that just spoke to me on such a deep level. I'm like, oh my gosh, every single critic or person I've heard talk about this is just like, it was okay, something action. They only had a few action scenes. Like, that wasn't the point. The point was the dialogue and digging into those questions about where the Matrix started, where it came to, where it's not necessarily a war between the humans and machines anymore, but the machines Like if that was like the enemy, as an analogy, if that was the enemy attempting to hold people complacent, okay, the war is over. Neo already won the war. It's like Christ already accomplished what he did on the cross, okay? And the enemy has no rights. He has no power left, even though he attempts to exercise that over us. And so in the Matrix, the analogy is, wow, the war was over at the end of the third movie when Neo was sacrificed to completely destroy that program and that code of Smith. And so now it's like the enemy is still attempting to hold the captives in place with their complacency and their bliss and keep them clouded, keep them distracted, and keep them trapped between their hopes and dreams and their fears in this little comfort zone bubble to still be able to drain the people of their energy, because that's what kept the Matrix going. And the machine mainframe, or the machine city, because that was what it was. The whole point is that the enemy had taken people captive, learned how to clone them, and use them as batteries to drain their energy for the enemy's purposes. And so the enemy is still attempting to do that, even though the people now have the freedom to be unlocked in a different way than it was in the past. It's like the New Testament or the New Covenant of there's this new revelation of setting people free. And so by the end of the movie, it's like there's a scene where it finally gets to, it's like, hey, and not to go into any spoilers too much or anything, it's just finally they get to this point where it's like, okay, you know, we're changing some stuff. Neo and Trinity, they're just, golly, they tapped back into their eagle mode together, and then they came in to change some stuff. And I just love that so much. And to me, that's like an analogy for, okay, you know, if I can be Neo and learn how to do this myself, it's like, okay, Lord, send the Proverbs 31 woman. That's like kind of symbolic of like Trinity, and pair us together so we can go out and crush this matrix, for example, in a symbolic way, not actually hurting people. That was Old Testament. The New Testament is saving people, sending love to people, helping people heal. It's different. It's not an eye for an eye and tooth for tooth. That was Old Testament, okay? It's more of a spiritual healing for people, right? On, what was it, Mount Sinai, 3,000 people died, okay, because they were unworthy of their sin, right? 3,000 people perished. But when Jesus came and the Holy Spirit came, 3,000 people at Pentecost, the Holy Spirit descended on them and 3,000 people were saved. So it's a little bit different perspective from the Old Testament. A lot of people still are trying to work with this Old Testament mode and kind of miss the New Testament idea of it, of this love and this healing and this new revelation that's here now moving forward. So I loved it. Let me know your thoughts. I'm curious to know what other people thought about this, and I know this is over 3 minutes, but you know what? So be it. I want to share some stuff about it, and let me know your thoughts, and I'll see you on the next one, okay? Peace.